You don't need revenge. You don't need to make a scene. And you definitely don't need to convince someone of your worth. The most powerful move you can make when someone plays with your time, your heart, or your energy is to disappear from their radar completely. No drama, no announcements, just presence removed. When you stop trying to be seen, when you stop giving them access, something unexpected happens. They finally notice. Let them sit in the silence. Let the absence of your effort echo louder than your words ever could. Because sometimes the sweetest justice is knowing that one day he'll regret everything he did to lose you. Now let's talk about how you do that with class, strength, and zero need for games. When someone has taken you for granted, the instinctive urge is often to make noise, to explain, to confront, to be heard. You might feel tempted to show them the weight of what they've lost, to prove your worth through arguments or emotionally charged conversations. But there's something far more powerful than words, something that cuts deeper than any angry outburst or tearful explanation: silence. Acting like he's invisible doesn't mean you hate him. It doesn't even mean you're angry. It means you've shifted your focus inward toward yourself, where your energy actually makes a difference. It means he no longer gets access to the space in your life that he used to occupy freely, mentally, emotionally, or physically. Silence is not passive, it's active power. It's you removing the supply of attention that he may have grown used to, even addicted to, without ever having to earn it. People often mistake being loud for being strong, but strength is in the discipline not to engage when you're triggered. Strength is walking away without needing to slam the door. When you act like he's invisible, you're not pretending he doesn't exist. You're simply making a conscious decision that he's no longer relevant to your story. You're reclaiming your peace. There's a reason this hits so hard for someone who once felt like they had you. When you stop reacting, when you stop showing up in the ways you always did, that's when the loss actually registers. Regret doesn't usually hit when someone leaves. It hits when they realize you're no longer waiting, that you're no longer checking, that you're not hurt anymore, you're just done. That's a completely different kind of heartbreak for the person who thought they could circle back whenever they wanted. You see, attention is a form of validation. Every time you text, call, argue, or even post something that seems aimed at them, you're still feeding the connection. Even negative attention is a form of attention. It tells them, I still care. I'm still emotionally tied to this. But when you go quiet, when you stop watching their stories, stop replying, stop engaging entirely, that's when the confusion sets in. Because suddenly, they're no longer the center of your emotional world. They're no longer the cause of your reactions. And the one thing a person with ego can't stand is no longer having control. People don't expect silence. They expect backlash. They expect you to explain yourself or try to make them see what they lost. And most of all, they expect you to still care. So when you shift gears, not with bitterness, not with spite, but with complete disinterest, you're showing a kind of self-respect that they probably never expected from you. That's what stings. That's what creates the regret, because now your silence isn't just an absence. It's a message that says, I've evolved beyond needing you to understand. It says, you no longer hold power here. And if there's anything that turns the tables emotionally, it's when someone realizes that the person they thought would always be available has become unreachable, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. You're not trying to destroy him. You're not playing games. You're just moving in a way that says, I'm unavailable for the nonsense I once tolerated. That's how silence becomes a mirror. He's left to sit with himself, no longer distracted by your presence. And in that space, regret has a funny way of creeping in. Not because you punished him, but because you finally stopped giving him the privilege of access. Detachment is often misunderstood. People assume it means you don't care, that you're cold or heartless, but in reality, detachment is clarity. It's knowing exactly what you deserve and refusing to settle for anything less. It's no longer feeling the need to beg someone to treat you right, show up for you, or love you the way you love them. When you detach from someone who once had emotional power over you, it sends a message louder than anything you could say. That message is, you no longer have access to me, and that's when regret begins. When you were emotionally invested, every little thing they did mattered. You analyzed their texts, waited for their calls, made excuses for their behavior, and convinced yourself that if you just held on a little longer, they'd come around. But when you detach, not out of anger but out of awareness, everything changes. You no longer wait. You no longer hope. You no longer engage in the emotional tug-of war. That shift is where the power lies. Because once someone realizes you're no longer emotionally reactive, they start to see just how much of your energy they were absorbing without giving anything back. There's a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when someone begins to feel your absence. Maybe it's when they go to check if you viewed their story and you're not there. Maybe it's when they send a message they thought would spark a reaction and all they get is silence. Or maybe it's just a sudden awareness that the comfort of your attention, your effort, your care is gone. That's when the regret sets in, not because you did something cruel, but because you stopped doing everything. Detachment removes their sense of control. When someone knows they can affect your mood, get a rise out of you, or pull you back in with just a few words, they feel secure, even if they're treating you poorly. But when you no longer respond to the games, the inconsistencies, or the breadcrumbs, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability, especially from someone they thought they had figured out, is unsettling. It forces them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about their hold on you. It's not about pretending to be unaffected. It's about getting to a place where your peace is no longer negotiable. You stop looking for signs, stop replaying conversations, stop trying to decode mixed messages. You just see things for what they are and make a decision. This is not where I'm meant to stay. And when that decision is made, without fanfare or drama, it's powerful, because it's no longer rooted in what they're doing. It's rooted in what you know you deserve. That shift is what starts to haunt them. They remember how much you gave, how patient you were, how much you tried. And now, that version of you doesn't exist for them anymore. They thought they'd always have access to your soft side. They thought they could keep you on stand by while they figured themselves out. But detachment ruins that illusion. It puts them face to face with the reality that you've moved on, not just physically, but emotionally. You see, you don't need to announce your growth. You don't need to post quotes about self-love or show them how happy you are without them. True detachment is quiet. It doesn't seek attention. It just is. And when he starts to notice that your world no longer revolves around him, that his name no longer holds emotional weight in your life, that's when the regret becomes real. Not because you tried to make him feel it, but because you stopped trying at all. There's a trap many people fall into after being hurt, the desire to teach the other person a lesson. You want them to feel what you felt, to understand how deeply they affected you, and to recognize the damage they caused. So you stay longer than you should, explain more than you need to, and argue in hopes that something will finally get through. But here's the truth. People rarely change because someone pleads with them to. They change because they have to. Because life, time, and distance force them to look in the mirror and see the consequences of their actions. That's why your most powerful move isn't trying to teach him a lesson. It's graduating from the entire situation. When you graduate, you stop trying to make sense of why someone couldn't love you the way you deserved. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head, hoping that the right words might have changed the outcome. You stop putting energy into convincing someone of your worth. You simply realize that trying to drag someone to your level of emotional maturity is a losing game. If he didn't see your value when you were giving him your heart, your time, your loyalty, then no amount of explaining will suddenly make him wake up. That moment of awakening has to come from within, and often, it only comes after you've walked away for good. Graduating doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you've reached a new level of awareness. You see the pattern. You see how many times you lowered your standards to keep the connection alive. You see how many chances you gave, not because he earned them, but because you hoped he would rise to the occasion. And once you see all that clearly, you can't unsee it. That clarity is your exit point. It's the moment you realize this was never about fixing him. It was about remembering yourself. There's a quiet dignity in choosing not to argue anymore, not because you're giving up, but because you finally understand that the only way to win is to walk away. You're not abandoning love, you're abandoning dysfunction. You're leaving behind the idea that love should be hard, painful, or full of emotional chaos. You're done being someone's emotional project. You're ready to be someone's partner, someone's peace. And yes, he might notice your absence. He might come back with apologies, realizations, even tears. But when you've truly graduated, those things don't sway you anymore, because growth has a funny way of changing your taste. What once drew you in now repels you. The inconsistency, the emotional games, the lack of real effort, you see it all for what it is. And more importantly, you see yourself in a new light, not as someone who wasn't enough, but as someone who was too much for the wrong person. You don't need to make him regret losing you. Life will do that on its own. What you need is to free yourself from the cycle of trying to be understood by someone who chose not to understand you when it mattered. Your healing isn't in their realization, it's in your release. And when you walk away without bitterness, without the need to prove anything, you reclaim your power. You stop being the student in someone else's emotional classroom, and you become the graduate of your own growth. That's when everything starts to shift, not because you forced it, but because you finally decided to stop trying and just be done. Energy is one of the most valuable currencies you have. It determines how you show up in the world, what you attract, and how you feel about yourself day to day. But the problem is, we often give it away too freely, especially to people who haven't earned it. When you invest your emotional energy into someone who's inconsistent, disrespectful, or just not showing up for you, you end up emotionally bankrupt. You wake up drained, anxious, and unsure of your worth. Why? Because you're constantly overextending yourself in hopes that one day they'll finally reciprocate. That's a dangerous way to live, and it always leads to disappointment. The truth is, your attention, your care, your time, those are gifts. But when you keep giving them to someone who doesn't value them, it sends a message that says you don't value them either. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. If someone knows that no matter how they behave, you'll always show up, always respond, always forgive without boundaries, they stop seeing your love as something special. It becomes expected, it becomes background noise, and the more they take, the less you have left for yourself. Redirecting your energy isn't about being cold or punishing anyone. It's about rebalancing the scale. It's about choosing to pour into things that pour back into you. Every moment you spend obsessing over someone's lack of effort is a moment you could have spent building something better for yourself, your career, your passions, your friendships, your own peace. Imagine how powerful you'd feel if you took even half the energy you've wasted on someone undeserving and reinvested it in yourself. That's where confidence is built. That's where healing happens, not in hoping they'll change, but in realizing you can change your focus. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, if I just give a little more, they'll see how much I care. But love doesn't work like that. Real connection is mutual. It flows in both directions. If you're always the one initiating, forgiving, explaining, or compromising, you're not in a partnership, you're in a performance. And every time you perform, hoping to earn their love, you abandon a part of yourself. That's too high a price to pay for temporary attention. When you pull back your energy, it may feel uncomfortable at first. You might feel guilt, fear, or even loss. But that discomfort is just your mind adjusting to new boundaries, boundaries you should have had in place long ago. And over time, that space you created by stepping back will start to fill with things that actually nourish you. You'll laugh more, you'll feel lighter, you'll reconnect with parts of yourself that were buried under all that emotional labor. And here's what often happens. Once your energy is no longer directed at them, they start to notice. The attention they took for granted is suddenly gone. The consistent presence they relied on has disappeared. And while you're out there building a life that's full without them, they're left to wonder why they no longer feel important. That's not revenge, that's consequence. When someone loses access to your energy, they feel the void. And sometimes that's what sparks their regret. But by that point, it doesn't really matter, because you've already learned the most important lesson. Your energy is sacred. It's not meant to be scattered. It's meant to be invested where it grows, where it's matched, where it's seen. And the moment you start protecting it, everything in your life starts to change. Not because you forced someone to love you, but because you finally started loving yourself more. Closure is something many people chase after a relationship ends. You want the perfect explanation, the apology you deserve, the emotional reckoning where they finally acknowledge everything they did wrong. You imagine the conversation that would tie up all the loose ends and give you peace. But the hard truth is, that moment rarely comes, at least, not the way you think it will. Waiting on someone else to give you closure is like waiting for someone to return something they never valued in the first place. The most powerful closure isn't something they give you. It's something you become. You let your life, the way you move on, evolve, and he'll be the answer you were looking for. The reality is, if someone truly cared enough to give you genuine closure, they wouldn't have left you in confusion to begin with. They wouldn't have ghosted you, played games, or offered you half-hearted answers when you deserved the truth. People often avoid hard conversations not because they're confused, but because they don't want to face accountability. So if you're stuck waiting for a clean explanation or that moment of recognition that validates your pain, you're putting your healing in the hands of someone who's already proven they don't know how to handle your heart. That's why you take that power back, not by confronting them again, not by texting them your final thoughts, but by rebuilding your life without them, and not just on the surface. I'm talking about the kind of healing where you no longer need them to see it. You're not posting quotes to get their attention or doing things to make them jealous. You're genuinely living. Your life becomes the period at the end of a chapter you once begged them to finish, and eventually they'll notice, not because you tried to make them, but because energy doesn't lie. People can sense when you've truly moved on. The silence becomes real. The access is gone. That version of you that waited, explained, and hoped no longer exists. They might resurface. They might test the waters to see if they still have a grip on your emotions. But when you've made peace within yourself, their reappearance doesn't rattle you. You're not bitter. You're just indifferent, and that indifference is everything. It shows that you didn't just survive the experience, you outgrew it. You learned to hold space for your own emotions, to create your own answers, to define your own worth without needing validation from someone who couldn't give it. Let your progress speak louder than any closure conversation ever could. Let the new standards you live by, the boundaries you uphold, and the confidence you exude be the response they'll never get in words. That's the most satisfying form of closure, not revenge, not a breakdown of who was right or wrong, but the undeniable evidence that you've outlived the situation emotionally. You're not stuck in the pain anymore. You've taken it, learned from it, and used it as fuel to become stronger, wiser, and more grounded. When you show up in the world as someone who no longer needs that ending to feel whole, it's magnetic. You attract better, you move differently, you choose people who reflect the love you give, rather than those who take it for granted. That's the full circle moment, not when they finally understand, but when you finally stop needing them to. Closure, in its most powerful form, doesn't come from a conversation, it comes from transformation. From the life you create that proves to you, and to anyone watching, that the person who walked away was never your ending, they were just a lesson. And you've already turned the page. One of the hardest lessons in relationships is understanding that regret is not your responsibility. When someone loses you, it's natural to want them to realize what they had, to feel the weight of their choices, and to wish they could turn back time. But the truth is, regret is their journey, not yours. It's the consequence of their actions, their inactions, and their inability to appreciate what was in front of them. Your job isn't to wait around hoping for that regret to hit, or to orchestrate situations so they feel it. Your job is to live your life fully, with no strings attached to their emotional process. This perspective frees you in ways that trying to make someone regret you never could. When you're focused on their regret, you're emotionally tied to them, whether you realize it or not. You're waiting for a reaction, hoping for acknowledgement, and letting your peace depend on their realization. That's a precarious place to be because it gives them power over your happiness, but when you accept that regret is theirs to carry, you take that power back. You're no longer a prisoner of their feelings. You're a master of your own. Regret can be a slow, painful process for someone. It doesn't always hit immediately. Sometimes it creeps in quietly after days, weeks, or even months of missing what they lost. And sometimes it's accompanied by confusion. Why did someone they thought was always there suddenly disappear? Why did they stop caring? But none of that is something you control. What you do control is how you respond to your own life during that time. Whether you choose to dwell on what might have been or move forward with confidence and grace, there's a kind of power in detaching yourself from the desire for their regret. It means you no longer measure your worth by whether they realize your value. You no longer need to prove yourself or earn a second chance. Instead, you focus on becoming unforgettable in your own right, not through desperation or trying to get their attention, but through authenticity, self-love, and growth. When you cultivate your own happiness and success, you become the kind of person whose absence is deeply felt, not because you made it so, but because you became someone impossible to replace. This isn't about cruelty or coldness. It's about recognizing that you can't make someone love or appreciate you. You can only show up as your best self and let the rest unfold naturally. If they regret losing you, that's their experience to sit with. If they don't, that's a reflection of them, not you. Holding on to hope for their regret keeps you stuck in the past, tangled in what could have been, rather than fully present in what is. The best kind of regret is the one that comes too late for them, but never arrives for you. You don't need to orchestrate your life around being missed or longed for. You simply need to live so well, so fully, that anyone who once took you for granted wonders what they lost. And by living well, I mean more than just surface-level happiness. I mean deep satisfaction with who you are, the boundaries you set, the goals you chase, and the peace you protect. That kind of life is magnetic, not because you're trying to attract attention, but because it radiates confidence and self-respect. When regret does visit him, it will be sharp and real, but it won't be your problem anymore. You'll be too busy loving yourself, building your future, and enjoying the freedom you fought so hard to claim. That's the ultimate victory, not in making him suffer, but in refusing to suffer yourself. You've taken the reins of your own story, and regret becomes nothing more than a footnote in the life you're busy creating. So don't waste your energy on hoping he feels regret. Invest your energy in becoming someone who doesn't need anyone else's validation to thrive. Because when you do that, regret loses its power. It no longer controls your emotions or your decisions. And that's how you truly win, by making your happiness independent of their mistakes and your peace unshakable by their absence. At the end of the day, the real power isn't in making him regret losing you. It's in choosing yourself. It's in stepping into your worth so fully that his absence becomes irrelevant to your happiness. When you act like he's invisible, you're not just shutting a door on the past. You're opening one to your future, one filled with respect, love, and peace that you no longer have to negotiate for. Let regret be his burden, not yours. Your job is to rise above, to shine brighter, and to live a life so magnetic that the right people can't help but be drawn to it. That's the kind of power no one can ever take away from you. So hold your head high, protect your energy fiercely, and remember, you're worth more than anyone who ever failed to see it.